A little over 1 month of free MRT rides. That's what President Duterte announced yesterday in a bid to provide temporary relief from rising fuel prices. The catch, transport officials are still ironing out details on how to foot the bill. Senior correspondent Lois Calderon tells us more.
President Duterte says train rides at the MRT3 will be free from March 28 till end April. But he stopped short of saying how and who will pay for the freebies. It's not the government that owns yet that elevated railway, and that ownership debacle has been running for over a decade now under an intricate build, lease, transfer, or BLT agreement. Our source from the Transportation Department says regulators are still fine-tuning funding details. One option is to book the free train rides as subsidy, which has been the case for decades. Under the BLT deal, revenues to the private consortium that operates MRT3 are lease payments. So subsidies or free train rides mean loss for the government. The second option is to tap some 2.5 billion pesos in unused budget of the Transportation Department earlier approved under the budget law. Transport officials are actually unsure, as the free ride order was a surprise. We tried getting in touch with Secretary Artugade, MRT3 officials, and the private consortium, but they did not respond to our texts and calls. Still, commuters cheered the news. This commuter makes a number of transfers to save on gas.
Hindi naman masyadong crowded. Walang problema.
Gumagana naman, though lagi kasi ako nag-escalator lang kaya di ako sure sa elevator. Pero may nakita ako nag-elevator, gumagana naman.
Faster trains, shorter waiting time, cleaner toilets with tissue paper, working elevators, and upgraded security cameras. This is their rehabilitation promise. But this passenger encounters technical glitches.
Kapag ganito po ay mahirap kaya pipila ulit ako.
Calls for more free train rides are coming from the Congress lobby. One from Representative Angelica Ko. History is rife with populist policies, especially during an election year, and the tandem of more cash transfers and free train rides is well-timed, just when pump prices soar to a record. As the saying goes, there's no such thing as a free lunch, so you have to know who pays for it and at what cost. Lois Calderon, CNN, Philippines.
Well, following the price rollback of fewer products this week, the Energy Department made a surprise inspection of retail stores and dealerships of cooking gas or LPG in Metro Manila. Officials flagged some stores which do not have proper business documents. Some retailers also had the wrong seal for their containers. These supposed violations will be forwarded to the legal department of the Energy Department for evaluation.
Pag sinabi natin documents, yung standards compliance certificate, kung sila ay nag-apply sa DOE for their respective activity. Saka yung mga tinitinda nila kung compliance din sa rules and regulations na nasasakop sa pagtitinda ng LPG.
The current retail price for LPG is 800 to 1,100 pesos. All inspected stores observe the appropriate pricing. The department says there's no word yet if the price of LPG will increase in the coming months. COMELEC gives the Office of the Vice President the green light to resume COVID-19 response projects even during the campaign period. Belisa Lopez has the details.
COMELEC has allowed some projects of the Office of Vice President Leni Robredo to continue during the home stretch of the campaign period. Commissioner George Garcia says the poll body approved the January petition of Robredo's office in an executive session on Wednesday. This means the OVP can continue its pandemic response initiatives like the Swab Cab, Bayanihan e-Consulta for COVID-19 patients, and Vaccine Express, which brings coronavirus shots to communities. Garcia adds some projects under the Social Welfare Department will also proceed. The ban is in place from March 25th until May 8th to prevent politicians from possibly using public funds for their campaigns. Robredo's spokesman Barry Gutierrez thanks COMELEC for its decision, saying this will allow the so-called Angat Buhay projects to help more people nationwide. Commissioner Socorro Inting earlier said projects of humanitarian nature are often excused from the public works ban. Rules also exempt disaster relief operations as well as ongoing construction projects. Melissa Lopez, CNN Philippines.
On the campaign trail, presidential candidate Ping Lacson and running mate Tito Soto woo voters in the province of Cotabato, where peace and order are key issues. George Quiles joins us live from Milagro and Cotabato. George, tell us about the tandem's plans to resolve armed conflicts in Mindanao.
Albeit the Lacson-Soto tandem is proposing a number of approaches in resolving armed conflicts between different groups here in Mindanao. For groups with existing peace pacts with the government, like the Moro Islamic Liberation Front or MILF, presidential candidate Senator Ping Lacson says it is important for the government to keep its word, especially on the political and economic aspects of the agreement. Lacson adds the office of the presidential advisor in the peace process should speed up the integration process of the armed combatants of the MILF. As for armed groups aligned with the terror group Islamic State, the Partido Reforma standard bearer says they should be held criminally liable based on the provisions of the law.
That's exactly the reason why we should make good with our promises or obligations natin under the peace agreements para hindi sila maging disgruntled and they would join the party or yung breakaway party. We have to put a stop to the never-ending, parang vicious cycle eh. But, you know, meron ding obligation, may pagkukulang din minsan ng government kasi yung napag-usapan, hindi na deliver.
As for the New People's Army, Lacson says localized peace talks should continue. Lacson and his running mate, Senate President Tito Soto, believe that the concept of the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or NTF-LCAC, must continue, but its implementation must veer away from politics. Pia?
George, tell us about the prospects of the Lacson-Soto tandem to get votes in Mindanao, particularly there in Cotabato.
Well, the tandem is banking on the support of their ally, senatorial candidate Manny Piñol. Piñol, aside from being a former agriculture secretary, is a former governor of the province. But Piñol himself says it is not easy to get votes in Mindanao now. He says President Duterte is still has a huge clout here. There's reason why his personal endorsement will definitely really matter. So, as we know, his party, PDP Laban Kusi wing, has already endorsed the candidacy of Bongbong Marcos and presidential daughter Sara Duterte. But it isn't clear yet, Pia, if the party's choice is also the president's personal choice. Given the situation, Piñol says he needs to work doubly hard to be able to deliver votes for Lacson and Soto. Back to you.
George Quiles there reporting live from Cotabato. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno saying he's not threatened by the PDP Laban Kusi wing's endorsement of fellow presidential candidate Bongbong Marcos, but Moreno admits the move might have made his campaign more difficult.
Mga pedigree na nga, o sila mga parang mga pedigree na malalaking grupo sa politika. Siyempre, kailangan maging ako sa mga bayan na isasamahan nila ako, sasama sila sa hirap ng laban, hindi sa magaan na laban. So the reason why it existed is to oppose the dictatorship ng Arab, so the dictatorship. Tapos dito sa mga, kaya ko lang ang bayan.
Labor leader Leody de Guzman taking a swipe at PDP Laban faction President Alfonso Cusi. De Guzman says Cusi, as energy secretary, chose political interest first before addressing the fuel price hike and the energy crisis. CNN Philippines has reached out to Cusi for comment. Still on the elections, presidential candidates making more campaign promises, from abolishing the rice tarification law to extending the term of barangay officials. CNN Arcangel reports.
Senator Manny Pacquiao took his campaign to Isabela, the top rice producer in Cagayan Valley. There, he vowed to abolish the rice tarification law if he wins the presidency. He says his administration will also allocate funds for buying palay directly from farmers. Supporters promised to deliver at least 100,000 votes for Pacquiao in the province, which is considered part of the so-called Solid North.
Ang akin naman ay
democratic country naman tayo, ang lahat malayang pumili ng mga kandidato nila. At alam ko, hindi naman lahat doon kay BBM, mayroon namang talagang naghahangad na tunay na pagbabago, hindi naghahangad para sa isang panggobyerno na traditional government.
If elected president, Vice President Leni Robredo promises to institutionalize the salaries of barangay officials and work to extend their terms from 3 to 5 years. Robredo says these were among the bills she filed when she was still a congresswoman.
Pero ang pinaka-purpose po niyan, para mas palakasin ang mga barangay dahil yung barangay nag-aasikaso ng lahat na pangangailangan natin.
Former Defense Chief and National Security Advisor Norberto Gonzales is pushing for oil price regulation among countries in Southeast Asia. He says these could help dictate oil prices in the region amid soaring costs in the world market. On local food prices, Gonzales wants a review of the Agrarian Reform Law, the Land Use Policy, and the Fisheries Act, saying these impede the immediate boost of production.
Kailangan yung food production natin, papa-enhance natin at the quickest time possible. And what I mean by oil food production, hindi lang sa lupa, pati sa tubig.
Manila Mayor Isko Moreno returned to Laguna to move voters from Santa Rosa, Biñan, and San Pedro, while former Senator Bongbong Marcos campaigned in Quezon Province. From Isabela, Cian Arcangel, CNN Philippines.
Coming up, investigators are getting to the bottom of a hazing incident in Laguna that led to the brutal death of a grade 12 student. And an internet service provider takes over the Alaska Aces franchise in the PBA. Stay tuned to CNN Philippines.
SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao, para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.
Welcome back to Newsnight. Authorities are getting to the bottom of a hazing incident in Laguna that allegedly killed a grade 12 student. 2 suspects are now in police custody. And as Tristan Odal reports, the victim's family is crying for justice.
The parents of 18-year-old Raymark R.R. Rabutazo recall fond memories of their only son before his tragic death on Sunday.
Talaga po ako'y para nang mag-black out na rin sa nangyari po sa nakita ng ano ko dahil yan po ay prinsipe sa amin. Walang ginagawa yan. Makainis na umalis ng bahay. Masigla. Sa loob po ng 2 taon ng ating COVID ay wala po siyang naging sakit. Yun po talaga, kaya ang gusto lang po talaga namin ay katarungan, hustisya. Humihingi po kami ng hustisya para po sa anak ko na madami pang maging pangarap.
RR was a graduating student and dreamt of becoming a policeman. All of this abruptly ended because of a fatal hazing.
Akala ko, aabutan ko pa yan ako na buhay. Nung naghihingalo na gano'n, baka isang hinga pa,
abutan ko pa, kaya ko pang masabihan o makausap pa. Ay nung pagdating ko doon, sinalubong ko ng aking naman na wala na nga daw po talaga. Nung nakita ko yan ako, wala na ho, magsak na ho yung parang damdamin ko na gano'n.
According to medical records, RR suffered severe physical injuries such as bruise marks at the legs and head injuries after alleged fraternity rights for neophytes.
Katarungan para sa aming anak na tinanggalan nila ng karapatan mabuhay at maging malaya. Sakit po sa isang ama na nagkaganyan ng aming anak. Nagsosolong anak po namin yan. Mahal na mahal po namin yung aming anak.
Arturo, not his real name, was with RR at the time. He also suffered injuries and wasn't able to walk for a day. He too was surprised about RR's death.
Pare-pares po kaming, ayun po, nangihina po, gawa po pagkatapos po nung ginawa sa amin. Ito po, may pasa, tapos hirap din po makalakad. Dati po, gusto ko po kasi nang dati pag sumali po sa ganun eh. Kaso naman po, nung pagsali ko po, may nangyari naman pong problema.
The police are holding 2 suspects and looking for 7 others. The family believes more people were involved in RR's death. Senator Mig Zubiri calls for the strict enforcement of the law he authored, the Anti-Hazing Act. CNN Philippines is still reaching out to the local police on the development of the case. In Kalayaan, Laguna, Tristan Udalo, CNN Philippines.
A spokesperson for the task force dealing with communists is facing 3 new complaints at the office of the Ombudsman. Lorraine Abadoy, also Communications Undersecretary, has been accused of red tagging Vice President Leni Robredo and other groups. Badoy said communist leader Jose Maria Sison's endorsement of Robredo shows she has a, quote, tactical alliance with communist rebels. 26 complainants want the Ombudsman to preventively suspend Badoy and file charges against her. They cited violations of the election law and even the Constitution.
Hindi ito tungkol kay VP Leni, isang biktima na si VP Leni ng red tagging. Hindi ibig sabihin na wala na siya sa poder, wala na siyang culpability or criminal liability anymore. Hindi. Kaya ngayon, dapat mag-isip-isip na siya. Right, Congressman? Yan ang isa nating reason bakit tayo nag-file. Kailangan natin ng deterrence.
Kung gusto ni Yusek Badoy at iba pang opisyal ng NTF-ELCAC na mangampanya laban kay VP Leni o sa Makabayan, dapat magbitiw muna sila sa kanilang posisyon.
Badoy dismissed the complaints as, quote, obvious propaganda of communist fronts and insisted her claims were not red tagging. Complaints have been filed against Badoy as early as 2020. Another grim milestone in South Korea with over 10 million COVID-19 cases reported since the pandemic began. Authorities logged almost 500,000 new infections on Tuesday. South Korea has recorded some of the highest daily cases in the past weeks. Now, with cases surging in Asia and Europe, U.S. health officials are expecting the same scenario. For one expert, time is of the essence to beat the threat of the Omicron subvariant. CNN's Maddie Gaither tells us more in today's Health Minute.
In the UK, new COVID-19 cases are climbing once again, driven largely by the Omicron BA2 subvariant. And top health officials say what happens there tends to play out here in the US about 2 to 3 weeks later.
We better pay close attention to what's going on there.
Dr. Anthony Fauci says the US will likely see an uptick in cases, but not a surge, as BA2 is more contagious than the original Omicron variant. But right now, Fauci says it doesn't seem to be the cause of the UK's rise in hospitalizations.
It's a very interesting situation where the cases are going up, but it does not at this point in time appear to be any degree of severity.
Fauci says BA2 may become the dominant variant in the U.S. today. The CDC said it was the cause of nearly 35% of new COVID-19 infections in the past week, up from about 22% the week before. Fauci cautions the U.S. needs to be prepared for the possibility of another variant in the future. That means building up supplies of antivirals and tests and vaccinations.
We can't just say we're done. Now we're going to move on. We've got to be able to be flexible.
Meanwhile, FDA vaccine advisors are scheduled to meet on April 6th to discuss the possible need for COVID-19 booster shots in the future and whether the vaccine could become an annual shot similar to flu shots. For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
In other world headlines, no sign of survivors yet in what has been the worst air disaster in China in over a decade. A China Eastern Airlines flight with 132 people on board crashed in a mountainous area in Guangxi province on Monday. Over 2,000 emergency workers have been deployed to the site, but search efforts were suspended this morning because of bad weather. Authorities are still investigating the cause of the incident. Now, back here at home, many believe learning to live with COVID-19 is the end game of this pandemic, as lockdowns can take a toll on the public and the economy. While people adapt to the new normal amid looser restrictions, a health expert warns a surge may happen again if we let our guard down. Paige Javier has that story.
2 years since the COVID-19 pandemic unfolded, many continue to feel the so-called pandemic fatigue. While some are still cautious here in the country, many are confident we won't go back to square one.
Masarap sa pakiramdam na maluwang na po tayo.
Kakatakot yan, na apektuhan tayo sa ating mga trabaho.
Basta fully vaccinated na, kung parang kampante na.
The health department says cases are on a slow decline, even as Metro Manila and other areas have shifted to alert level 1. But for some Filipinos living abroad, the tough restrictions are already taking its toll.
Kahit nung nag-zero COVID na yung Hong Kong, stringent pa rin yung measures. So, more on fatigue na talaga.
Cases in Hong Kong have been hitting 20 to 30,000 daily recently, despite the stringent zero COVID policy. Those who can no longer keep up with the measures choose to leave the financial hub.
Umaalis na talaga yung mga tao. It's mentally exhausting. Hindi na sila very hopeful na things are getting better. Unless, yun nga, may change of mindset.
In South Korea, one of the model nations in pandemic response, cases are also skyrocketing.
If you look at most of these countries, it's because of the waning immunity and the ability of the Omicron, the BA2, to evade the antibody that is being produced by the vaccine.
Dr. Rodgin Solante says he cannot discount the possibility of another COVID-19 surge in the country.
Now, what I'm worried about is that, yes, we are below 1,000, but we are not below 500. So meaning there is still a slow and creeping transmission in the community.
He emphasizes the importance of getting a booster shot, especially for the vulnerable population. So far, over 11 million people have received booster doses. Solante warns against further easing of restrictions and mass gatherings, especially in the run-up to the elections. He also says Filipinos should continue to wear face masks, and alert level 1 should remain for the next few months. Paige Javier, CNN Philippines.
We'll take a quick break, and when we return, Converge is entering the PBA after acquiring the Alaska Aces franchise. Plus, updates on the award season with some big names in music gracing the Oscar stage. Keep it here on Newsnight.
Sudlan niini tinguha sa SMC ang
Being
pag-uswag
a Filipina here in
sa
Japan,
mga Pilipino.
kakayanin ko ang
Karon,
mga hirap
gikan sa
para
SMC,
sa akin mga
ang
pangarap.
Ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.
Welcome back. The Weather Bureau Pag-asa redefines the meaning of super typhoon and modifies the tropical wind signal system. A super typhoon should now have maximum sustained winds of at least 185 kilometers per hour. It was previously defined as a tropical cyclone with maximum sustained winds of more than 220 kph. Pag-asa explains the Philippines has the highest range of maximum sustained winds for a super typhoon compared with other Asian neighbors like Japan, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. Pag-asa also modified the wind threat of each signal number. You can see them on your screens. So far, no cyclones are expected to affect the country in the coming days. The Bureau advises the public to take precautionary measures to minimize heat stress, as well as to optimize the daily use of water for personal and domestic consumption. Well, sports news now. Internet service provider Converge is the newest team in the PBA. The firm officially acquired the Alaska franchise after it went on sale last month. The announcement also comes 4 days after the Alaska Aces played their final game in the league. Former PBA Commissioner Chito Salud will serve as governor of the team. Salud says they have yet to determine if they will retain the core of the Alaska team.
In PBA Season 47, Converge aspires to bring to the court a brand of basketball consistent with its revolutionary and entrepreneurial spirit. We have barely 3 months to prepare for the next season. No? I'll be working closely with Dicky Bachman on this. Together we'll review and assess the performance of the players and the coaches and make a decision soon.
A formal launch is set for April 5th, where Converge will announce its team name. In entertainment news, the Oscars just announced this year's performers, and set to take the stage is Queen Bee herself. Beyoncé is also attending as a nominee for her song Be Alive from the film King Richard. Other performers, including Billie Eilish and Sebastian Yatra, who will sing the Oscar-nominated track Dos Oruguitas from Encanto. The awards night is set for March 28, 8 in the morning, Philippine time. And on to another red carpet, Olivia Rodrigo and BTS won major honors at today's iHeartRadio Awards. The film vocalist took home 3 trophies, beating out fellow chart toppers Ariana Grande and Taylor Swift for Female Artist of the Year. BTS won 2 categories, including Best Music Video for Butter. But Jennifer Lopez nabbed the night's biggest honors, iHeartRadio's Icon Award. J-Lo also performed her hits, Get Right and On My Way. And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.